This episode is brought to you by Cartamax. Life on the front line requires you step up your game. Owned and operated by former Navy SEAL Sean Matson, Cartamax has designed just the right supplements for you and is offering American Party an exclusive offer. Buy one, get one free on your first order. Go to Cartamax.com and use the promo code American. That's Cartamax.com, helping you achieve your max. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, doing a solo today. Dakota's out on the road advocating for some stuff for psilocybin and MDMA research into post-traumatic stress and things like that, stuff that we've been working on for a long time. Today we have with us a special guest, Mr. Bob Carey from Independence Fund. He's a captain in the U.S. Navy, retired. So we're not huge fans of the Navy around here, but look, it is what it is, right?
Hey, if you didn't have the ASVAB scores to get in the Navy, don't blame me, dude.
Well, my ASVAB score was pretty high. But so was I, by the way. I was high the whole time. No, it's, I being an Uber driver from the Marine Corps, somebody's got to do this stuff, right?
You know what? At least we have good gate guards.
That's true. You also have, a lot of people don't know that the Navy's got probably a better Air Force than the Air Force, to be honest. I mean, not to talk shit or anything.
That's not a high bar, dude.
Yeah, it's true. So we're here today to talk about the real.
But I do have an Army guy in my back wall. So,
oh, yeah.
Wait,
who is that? Who is it?
I used to run the Federal Voting Assistance Program at the Department of Defense, and it's some stock photo I got in order to be able to advertise to military personnel about their ability to vote.
Oh, boy. All right, cool. That's good. So we're here today to talk about veteran suicide, but we won't limit ourselves to veteran suicide. There's also a huge problem going on with active service members as well. Before we get started with all of that, go ahead and introduce yourself, tell people who you are, what you do, and so on and so forth.
So, Bob Carey, I run the advocacy operations for the Independence Fund up in Washington, D.C. We're a national organization that helps catastrophically disabled veterans and their caregivers and families. But we also have a program that focuses on suicide prevention for tactical combat units, where we bring together small company battalion-sized tactical combat units from a single deployment that experience high combat rates downrange and are now suffering from high suicide rates. We bring them back together as a unit in order to be able to try to see if we can rebuild that unit cohesion to address suicide prevention. And we've had some early success with it.
So this is Operation Resiliency is what you're referring to, right? Is the name of the program?
Correct.
And
yep.
What you guys do is raise money and then fund get-togethers, like a weekend trip to somewhere where everybody's invited from the old unit. Right. And this is not necessarily limited to, but focuses on units that were hit particularly hard with deaths in combat, right?
Correct. Cool. And we're looking, yes. So this is our hypothesis is that young combat veterans are at much higher risk for suicide than other veterans.
Well, that's not a hypothesis. The data can certainly, and we'll get into that here in a few minutes, but the data 100% backs that up. I mean, it's not even close.
VA is saying that they think that combat is a protective factor, not a risk factor.
Well, the VA sucks out loud, as you know. It's one of the worst organizations in the history of the fucking military. But anyway.
Yeah, but they're responsible for it, and that's where the money goes. So we got to figure out how to be able to make them better.
Well, I mean that, or get rid of them altogether. But we'll stick with making it better here first. So I'm going to run through a couple of numbers right now, just so we can establish a baseline for what's happening. So 6,000 or more veterans have died by suicide each year since 2005. It's an average of 17.4 veterans per day between 2005 and 2018. More active duty soldiers have died from suicide, actually. This isn't veteran, this is active duty soldiers. More active duty soldiers have died from suicide than combat deaths in Afghanistan and Iraq combined. In 2018, veterans accounted for 14% of all American suicide deaths, though they only make up 7% of the population. So they're 1.5 times more likely to kill themselves than non-veterans. I mean, I guess that shouldn't come as any surprise, right? We see in any line of work that is intrinsically stressful, you see a higher rate of suicide, right? So higher rate of suicide for postal workers, for police officers, for firefighters, so on and so forth. That's pretty common, right?
Right.
In addition to the veteran stuff, 593 active and reserve service members committed suicide in 2019, 689 in 2020. That's a pretty significant increase year over year. Nearly 100 additional people out of 600 total. So that's pretty big. The active component year over year is up 8.3%. The reserve component is up 25.2%, and the guard
That's
is up.
Really,
yeah,
and that's really shocking.
Yeah, the guard is up 31.1%. Those last two numbers were indeed shocking to me. I had no idea that the reserve and guard elements were being hit that hard with this. This is a real epidemic, and it has been for some time, and it's one that, for some reason, I don't understand why, but the Department of Defense stopped giving the VA numbers.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why that's the case. Can you shed some light on that?
The closest I can come up with it is that people realize that combat deployments, especially repeat combat deployments, are a significant risk factor for veteran suicide. And so one of the ways to, stop that discussion is to stop the distribution of numbers.
Right. So instead of dealing with the issue, they've decided to just not collect data on the issue anymore.
I haven't really gotten a straight answer.
Right.
DOD says that VA no longer asks for it. VA says that DOD no longer provides it.
Right. So this is essentially a marketing situation, right? They're trying to put their failure behind them. Now, the data we've received from various organizations, but from yours in particular, veterans receiving care from the VA only have their suicide rate reduced by about 2.5%. I mean, 2.5% is better than 0%, but what the fuck? I mean, this is your entire job, is to make sure these people are taken care of, and they're overrepresented by at least 1.5 times, if not more, depending on, it's 2.2 times for women, and it's for men 34 and younger, it's fucking way higher.
Right.
And this is an abject failure by the government, by both political parties, by the VA itself, and by the Department of Defense. Why is no one inside any organization, inside the military, inside politics, doing shit about this? I don't get it.
Well, they're doing a lot. This is not being very effective. I mean, we're spending $10.5 billion in the VA a year on mental health, and it's not reducing it. It's not reducing veteran suicide. And more generally in the population, you're seeing also a significant increase in suicide. Like when I was a high schooler, the number one cause of death was auto accidents.
Right.
Now the number one cause of death for high schoolers is suicide.
Right. So this is a problem that is pervasive outside of the military, is what you're saying.
It is, but it's far worse in the military.
Correct.
And far worse amongst veterans.
Okay. Just some other stats here. 2018, the last year data was fucking collected, because why would we continue collecting it?
Well, no. It takes it takes 2 years then to be able to get it from all the local authorities and to be able to make sure that it's correct.
Okay, good. So 68.2% of veteran suicides were carried out with a firearm, 17.1% by suffocation, which I assume means hanging, asphyxiation, 9.5% by poisoning, which is, I assume they mean pills when they say poisoning, like just an overdose.
Yeah, usually it's a drug overdose.
Okay, and 5.2% defined as other, which who knows what that means. The Army, for whatever reason, accounts for the largest number of veteran suicides. I guess that's probably because it's the biggest branch, right? There's more members of the Army than
I do not know off the top of my head whether it's disproportionately represented.
Yeah, I haven't. I've looked at some of the numbers, but I haven't had a chance to go back and figure that out. You do a lot of work in this area. You guys have put together these retreats to help these guys. Do you feel like you're on the right path with this, right? I mean, you think that the talk therapy and all the other bullshit that's going on in the VA, it's clearly not working, whatever they're doing. So what is it that you guys feel will work?
Well, one of the things is that we're focusing on combat veterans, and we're focusing on combat veterans in a combat-friendly environment. You know, it's real difficult for even for non-combat veterans to be able to relate to a combat veteran in terms of their experience.
Right.
And so you bring together this unit, and I sat in on a couple of the sessions. I don't want to sit in a whole lot of them because this is their session, and I'm the swamp rat lobbyist, and so I'm not a clinician. But I mean, they really unpack. And you need that. We really try to build up this sense of resiliency, the ability to respond to changes in your life and new factors in your life that are negative, and to build up that resiliency. And we're seeing some pretty good response. We're seeing, even before we do surveys before and after, using a standard resiliency score, clinical resiliency score, and we're seeing 25-30% improvement.
Right, which is in stark contrast to the 2.5% improvement that the VA is currently getting. I mean, that's you're 10xing their results just by. I mean, you're not spending any more money than they are, clearly, right? You're simply trying a different strategy. So what is this something you're a lobbyist for Independence Fund and Operation Resiliency? Is this something that you're trying to get pushed into the mainstream, or is it? Yes. Or are you more just trying to get people to give money to your organization so you guys can broaden your scope? I mean, which I assume it's probably both, right?
Yeah, all the above. Yeah, definitely. And www.independencefund.org if someone wants to help out.
Right.
But there was a recent bill passed last year unanimously, both chambers of Congress. The Commander John Scott Hannon Veteran Suicide Prevention Act. It has a pretty big grant program for community organizations to be able to help with suicide prevention. And look, I mean, I've on some of your other shows, folks always talk about follow the money.
Yeah, that's me.
And there's a lot of organizations that did not want to allow an organization like us to be able to participate in those grants because they wanted the money themselves.
Correct. Yeah.
And so we spent a lot of time lobbying to make sure that an organization like ours at least had the chance to apply. Now, maybe our program isn't going to be good enough and we don't get the grant, but we should at least have the opportunity to apply. And that's because of money.
Yeah, that's not great. I can't think of anything more amoral than trying to push an ineffectual, ineffective platform over one that's demonstrably effective, simply because of pride of authorship or whatever it happens to be. Right? That is completely fucked.
Okay, but you know what? I do believe that everyone tries. They may fail at it, but I think that everyone's trying.
You're a little bit more optimistic than I am because I've got a really good memory. I remember Wounded Warrior Project and the fucking stupid bullshit they did for years, the way they wasted money. And I also remember, I don't actually have to remember because it's still ongoing, the issues with breast and prostate cancer and the amount of money that's been given to those organizations and the amount that's actually been spent on research, which is about 2%. Yep. About 2% of the total take for cancer donations over the last 50 years or however long has gone to actual research. The rest has gone to PACs and administrative fees and all kinds of other bullshit. So right. I politely disagree with you that people are trying. I don't think that's true.
Okay. Look.
I know you're being diplomatic because that's your job. I'm not a lobbyist. I'm an asshole with a fucking radio show. So I can say whatever I want.
The fact that in the DC community, the fact that people are going to say that Bob Carey, diplomatic.
I know. Well,
talking about the same Bob Carey that I know.
You're diplomatic compared to me. That's probably a more fair statement.
So not a whole lot is known about suicide. You know, right. I mean, that's one of the big problems here, is that we really don't understand a lot about suicide. We know, and the most we're able to do at this point is sort of break it down into risk factors and protective factors. And so a lot of the effort is to maximize protective factors and minimize the risk factors. And it's sort of like proving a negative at times. You know, I mean, someone doesn't die from suicide, that's a success, but it doesn't show up in a number per se.
Right.
And so that's part of the issue that we're dealing with as well.
Right.
But where I am pissed off is that, people want to avoid this issue of combat deployments, especially repeat combat deployments, being a significant risk factor.
Right.
And look, I mean, if the Department of Defense is going to say, you know what, I know that repeat deployments are a significant risk factor for veteran suicide, but I got to go to war with the Army I got.
Right.
And I'm going to hope like hell that I can do something on the back end of the deployment. But if I don't send these guys downrange, then more people are going to die downrange.
Correct.
You know what? That's a legitimate decision by a military commander.
It is, yeah. But it also calls into question. I mean, now you've got to answer for the plans you've submitted. You were a captain in the Navy, which is not like, I mean, that what is that, an 06?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you were an 06. You were the level of a brigade commander essentially in the Army or Marine Corps or whatever else. So
right.
You make decisions that affect people's lives on a daily basis in that job, and when you give somebody that totality of information, then they decide, you know what, this mission that you have isn't worth these people's lives. And that's something we should have asked way back in 2001 before we started sending masses of fucking soldiers all over the world, right? We've accomplished nothing at all, right? Essentially nothing with these wars. And they're still ongoing, by the way. Like the people that think the Iraq war is a thing of the past, I've got news for you, buddy. We still got people there. We still got people in Afghanistan, and we will for some time. We got people in Syria, all over the fucking place, in Africa. It's not going to stop anytime soon. Now, you said that we don't understand a lot about suicide. I think that is true in some ways, but it's our own fault. Well, there are a lot of things we do understand about suicide. We understand that when people are removed from their support system, they spiral pretty quickly. And that's what Operation...
And that's why that first year after discharge is like your most at-risk year.
Correct, yeah. So that's why Operation Resiliency exists in the first place. And that is taking that issue on head on. The other thing we know is that traumatic brain injury and damage to not just the brain but the pituitary system that affects hormone levels and things like that have a dramatic effect and cause a dramatic increase in suicidal potential. We know those things. What we haven't done yet, and this is something that really bothers me, is we haven't done any real research on the survivor's mind. We have thousands, tens of thousands of people, men and women, who have spent time with the gun in their mouths, either figuratively or literally, that we can talk to and find out, one, how they got there, and two, how they found their way out of that mental state. Whether it was through some support system or something they figured out on their own or whatever it is, we've collectively as a unit have done nothing to try to research that. And I don't understand why. That seems like it would be one of the more obvious, pathways here. And I don't see any.
I'll tell you this: it wasn't to me. I like the idea, and I want to talk to you more offline about this, about how we can do this. So I think this is a great idea, and I'd like to explore how we might be able to do more of that. I think it's good.
Good. Yeah. I mean, that seems reasonable to me. But again, if the Department of Defense and the VA won't even collect the information because they don't like where they. I mean, we see this all the time in politics, right? If somebody starts collecting information and processing data and they don't like where it leads, and they cut it off, and that's the wrong answer. There's no right versus left anywhere, in my opinion, but especially not when it comes to the lives of the people that protect us. So,
well, look, I don't think I'm at liberty to say which ones, but I know that a number of senators have brought this up with the new Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and that he's committed to getting back on track on this issue. And I've also talked with the new chief data officer at Department of Veterans Affairs, and he's talked about making this data a lot more publicly accessible. And that's part of this. You get buy-in when things are transparent. When people can go in and check for themselves, you get buy-in.
Right.
And so, I'm relatively optimistic. But again, I may be Pollyannish.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I according to a study by the Cleveland Journal of Medicine, combat veterans are not only more likely to have suicidal ideation, they're also more likely to act on the suicidal plan. Now, there's the disparity in suicide between veteran and combat veteran being so high seems obvious to me, because the combat veteran, of which I'm one, has had to, on multiple occasions, if not every day for a long period of time, stand face to face with their own mortality. I've had to say to myself, I'm probably going to die today, and I've got to be okay with that. Otherwise, I'm going to be paralyzed in combat, and somebody else is going to get fucked up because of my incompetence. And that is unacceptable. Most people develop the attitude over time that my death is okay, that's an okay solution, but other people dying because of me is not okay, right? And that makes sense to me. So if you've grown, I guess for lack of a better word, comfortable with the idea of your own death, once the suicidal ideations begin, I mean, it's a legitimate option right off the table, right? Or right off the bat, rather. Veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder are certainly more likely to suffer from depression and suicidal ideation. The VA discovered that where a service member is deployed and which branch of the military also has an effect, which is kind of interesting. I never knew this before. Service members in Iraq were more likely to develop PTSD than people in Afghanistan, and people in the Army were more likely than the Marines. Is there any insight on that? I have no idea why that would be the case.
Normally, I would respond with intra-service rivalry smack talk, but this seems inappropriate at this point to discuss that. So I will not. No, I mean, maybe because the Marine Corps is so small, it has a tighter service identity. Right. You know.
Well, I do notice that units in the Marine Corps get together on their own more frequently, or maybe that's anecdotal, but I see it more. And look, we are balls deep in the veteran and military space. If anything happens, typically we're aware of it, and I see a lot more Marine Corps people hanging out together, like old stay units that still hang out after 20 years of not seeing each other. And in the Army, it's not really like that, to be honest. Like my old unit, we do it from time to time, but the vast majority of these either can't, but for whatever reason, time, money, or just don't. Right. I'm not sure. I think there is a level of unit cohesion in the Marine Corps that is different. Not better, but different.
No, I mean, my unit, you know, this unit right here, you know, I mean, I would not place my combat experience anywhere close to your combat experience. But, you know, we were in Desert Storm together, and then the guys that followed me were in Somalia. And they, you know, we still are tight, you know, 30 years later, we're still tight. And we still have reunions, but of the 40, about 50 officers that, you know, aviators that served in my unit, over that 3-year period, we've had two suicides.
Right. I mean, that's a pretty high rate for such a small.
Yeah, that's 1 in 25.
Yeah.
You know, now a single suicide throws those numbers off. So
right, of course,
it can't be too statistically significant, but still, I mean, you know, it's remarkable. And so I think that, and then the other thing is that PTSD is cumulative. There's a large body of evidence that's showing that PTSD is cumulative. And so
explain what you mean by cumulative for the audience, please.
So, you know, going through the combat experience in 2 separate deployments is worse than going through the combat experience in 1 deployment.
So you're saying that a 12-month deployment is less stressful?
You go up in your PTSD, and then you start coming down, but then you go up again. I see. And then you start.
So it's almost like concussions that happen rapidly back to back. For those of you who don't know, who haven't looked into CTE, which is chronic traumatic encephalopathy, one of the things that's been discovered through the research the NFL has tried to hide for the last few years is that it's not just the concussion, it's the concussion followed by, or it's not the severity of the concussion itself. It is a concussion followed by another concussion, followed by another concussion in rapid succession. Even if they're just mild ones, there's more damage done from the collective nature of those than
Right.
from a major impact. Like Ben Askren getting kneed in the head by Jorge Masvidal, less damage was done to his brain as if he had been hit 4 or 5 times in the face during that fight, like right in a row, and got concussed each time. So that's a really interesting thing. I wasn't aware of that. So,
And then the other element is, does pre-service PTSD play into this as well?
right, yeah.
And and do people with pre-service PTSD have, are they more likely to join the service because they want to prove something to themselves?
Correct, yeah. And it speaks to the greater need for mental health awareness in American society at large, particularly with this younger crowd. Now, if we're seeing upticks in suicide and suicidal ideation amongst younger people, regardless of their military service. Now, obviously, it's higher in military service, but regardless of military service, we're still seeing increases. That's probably something that we need to deal with from a much earlier age. I mean, it's essentially people develop different schema, psychologically speaking, to deal with stress and trauma and all that stuff. I have a support system, or this is how I manage stress, or how I collect data and then set goals to work my way out of problems and things like that. And, when you get into the military, for better or worse, it's a very socialized organization. You know what I mean? You don't really do a whole lot on your own. You are around people all the time. There's somebody generally telling you what to do, or giving you a fucking left and right limit and a goal, holding you accountable. And there's troop leading procedures and all this other stuff they're designed as schema to help you be a problem solver. For some reason, we've not been able to take that from the military into veteran life. A lot of people haven't, right?
And that's exactly what we're trying to do with Operation Resiliency.
So when you go to one of these meetings with all these people, there's obviously the fellowship and getting back together part, but what's being done to educate these people on how to deal with their stress moving forward?
So the hook we use in order to be able to get people to come is we call it a military reunion. And we do fun activities: axe throwing, whitewater rafting, bonfire, top golf. But then in the morning, we get together and do unit PT, and then we do psychoeducation. And we have certified clinicians that come in and do psychoeducation about resiliency, about suicide prevention, about some of these issues. And then at the very end, we have a resource fair so that we introduce them to all the different resources. And generally, we have somewhere between 10 and 15% of the participants will enter into VA or DOD care out of one of our Operation Resiliencies. And so that's a large part of our goal. Build resiliency, get them into the care they need if they need it. But we don't put this together unless there's some type of command element that's helping structure it, whether it's an SEL or an XO or a CO who is who's spearheading this, or a senior NCO, and we rebuild that unit structure in Operation Resiliency. And then we continue that with wellness checks afterwards. We do 1 week, 30, 60, 90, 180-day wellness checks on these people and make sure they understand the resources are available to them, not only through the Independence Fund, but also through DOD or the VA. And during COVID, we've been doing the same thing. We've been doing virtual wellness checks, and we've had some of these, Zoom meetings go on for 4, 5, 6 hours where the guys continue to unpack their stuff.
Yeah, it's great.
So, but the unit leadership is key. And one of the things, and the next stage we're going to look into doing is taking a model from the VA called peer support specialists, where you get, military veterans, combat veterans who are then trained up by the VA in order to be able to be these peer support specialists. And we're looking to put that into Operation Resiliency units so that these folks can then take that on themselves and continue that role.
Right. So you're looking at kind of a train the trainer / repeating the chain of command, but out in civilian life in a way, holding each other accountable. I mean, it's not too different than an AA sponsor, I guess, if you want to go that route. Now you mentioned,
maybe we'll start using poker chips. I like that.
Yeah. Well, anything to get this shit to stop. And so in October of last year, General James McConville, who was the Army Chief of Staff, said that COVID-19 restrictions were contributing factors to veteran suicides. He said the scientists have said they're not able to show causation between COVID and suicide, but I would argue it is having an effect because it disconnects people. Now, we already know that the disconnect is one of the largest factors, right?
Right.
That's not even a matter of debate anymore. The Air Force Chief of Staff agreed, and says this is a national problem because COVID adds some additional stressors, a fear of the unknown, et cetera, et cetera. But the DOD denies that claim. The DOD has outright denied that COVID restrictions have led to an increase in suicides.
VA is doing the same thing, and they bring out charts that show that there's been no appreciable increase.
Right, and there's an increase in suicide nationwide. So what other factors have everyone in the country, all 350 fucking million people here, dealt with over the last year? It seems like, look, where there's smoke, there's fire. You do have to do research. Just because something makes sense doesn't mean it's necessarily true. But we've got enough anecdotal data at this point that charts and stuff that organizations that are clearly trying to hide issues aren't going to convince me. I mean, that's nonsense. Right. This seems like a propaganda campaign by the Department of Defense, and it's really problematic that the Army's Chief of Staff and the Air Force Chief of Staff are in stark disagreement with the leadership of the DoD. That's not how you solve problems, obviously, and I'm not blaming them, certainly. I don't.
Look, I mean, go ahead.
No, you go. You go.
So, again, we're trying to solve problems here, and I think we certainly applaud the Army and Air Force Chief of Staff for them coming out like this. Just like we applauded the flag and general officers in the past who said, I'm getting mental health care. It's all right to not be all right. One of the things that we really try to do in Operation Resiliency is to get that senior leadership to say, it is all right to not be all right, to get that senior leadership to discuss their own personal problems and how they sought that mental health care and how it's not as stigmatic to seek mental health care. I have sought mental health care both in my civilian life and in my military life, and it's been helpful. It's been life-saving, and that's a large part of this too. Is you're not alone, and it's all right to not be all right, and it may not be all right to not be all right downrange, but as soon as you get back home, it's all right to not be all right, and so and we need to encourage that. Right. And go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's one of the more abject failures in leadership I've ever seen at any level of any organization. Leaders in the military will routinely yell at their soldiers or airmen or Marines or seamen about whether or not they're.
You had to get that one in, didn't you?
I had to save it. I saved it for last. They'll yell at their troops for their uniform not being serviceable or for their weapon not being serviceable, but they'll also yell at them when they try to make sure that they themselves are serviceable. You pay leadership in the military has paid no attention to whether or not the troop themselves are serviceable. Right? Guns break.
How do we solve that? How do you think we solve that?
Well, I mean, it's a complex problem. I know as an infantry team leader, I knew that if I went to mental health, I lost my job. Right? I knew for a fact that if I come off the line and go through a sick call and then start going to mental health treatment, I'm pulled off the line. There's no question about that because we have to get. I was in the 2nd Airborne. We got to get ready for deployment. We don't have time for that shit. So.
Then you get right back into your whole thing about now I've let down my guys and someone's going to die because of my failure. Yeah,
correct. So there might not be an elegant solution to that situation, to be honest. So if I'm looking at a map, right, and I'm trying to navigate somewhere and I'm running into a draw right there, what I do is backtrack and go find another interdiction point where I can actually make some plans that will succeed. Now, if what you're saying is true and the multiple deployment thing is a problem, then we have to start re-strategizing the way we deploy our troops, right? I mean, money shouldn't be an option, or money should not be an obstacle.
Or we re-strategize what we do with them when they get back home.
Either way, yeah. I mean, maybe it is the case that, and I haven't seen any data about this, but maybe it is the case that it takes longer than a year to rehabilitate somebody's mind after a line deployment. Maybe it's, I mean, what do we, these mental health checks that happen after we get back from deployments are a fucking joke. They're just they're just checking the box, right? They're not actually doing anything.
Checking the box.
So why not? I don't understand why there's not like a 2 or 3 month period where these people are just off work. It's a vacation. You're off for 3 months, but you're still local. You're still hanging out with all your buddies and shit.
Right.
Maybe the Army or whomever it is pays to have your family members come in and hang out whenever they want and stuff like that.
I thought every day in the Army was a vacation.
Yeah, right. Well, mostly as an infantryman, I spent most of my time yelling at people and cutting grass, to be honest. But, you know, every now and again we got to shoot shit. But, yeah, I wonder about that. I mean, what is it? If the war is indeed something that needs to be done. I don't think these two wars are very effective, but let's say moving forward that we do have to fight wars. We obviously want to fight them with the best possible people we can. And regardless, I mean, you could buy a $250,000 car and you stop putting oil in it and the engine will seize. I don't care how cool the car is or how great it is or how well it's constructed. It could be the best car of all time. If you don't service it properly, it will stop performing. And it seems like America has decided that it's more interested in its goals than it is in its people. And I thought America was about people. So it's a huge disappointment to me to hear that the Department of Defense and VA are taking this hardline stance.
Well, I mean, and part of it also is, you know, that our especially the Department of Defense is so budget driven and minimum manning. And so we have to keep up readiness at all times. And, you know, a large part of this may very well be that we look at allowing ourselves to have our readiness scores drop precipitously for a unit returning from deployment. You know, maybe let it go to, when I was in, there was a 5-level score, you know, and you never wanted to go below 3. And, you know, maybe we let them go to the equivalent of, you know, R5 or R4 for a while after deployment and then build them back up. You know, as you talk about, really give people that time off to decompress and to unpack.
Right.
But that requires us to have more troops.
Maybe it requires us to
or reduce our deployment time, reduce our deployment amounts.
I mean, all of this seems to be coming to a head. We keep running into unsolvable issues, but there is a solution. The solution is to not recklessly deploy people simply for whatever the fuck reason because we think we need to, right? I guess. I have no idea what goes on inside the minds of these politicians who've never fucking laced up their boots and done a goddamn thing for this country except for rob it blind, frankly. These are some of the most... I've got a saying, probably not popular in your world, but it's called all politicians are cunts. I believe you can see it right here on my computer. I think they're the worst human beings that exist. And because I understand it. I felt the pressure of sending and leading people in combat in dangerous situations, including in times when I didn't believe in the mission, but I still got up and did my fucking job. And I don't see a whole lot of people doing their fucking job, frankly. If the VA and the DOD are not autonomous organizations, they are responsible to the taxpayer and to the leaders of this country. And so ultimately, that failure rests on them. I'm not mad at the VA. I'm not mad at the Department of Defense. I'm mad at the generals, and I'm mad at the presidents, and I'm mad at the Congress and Senate. They've completely fucked us over here. They've done nothing to try to help us. Not any real thing. They throw Band-Aids at this issue, right?
Well, okay, but look. You know, as other veterans in the space up here in Washington, D.C., you know, they are all going to, if they're not already watching and throwing, and throwing pasta at the screen because they're like, Carey is not diplomatic. There's things that we can try to change it. And the Independence Fund is trying to do so.
Right.
In addition to all the programs we do. So the way we develop our advocacy positions in the Independence Fund is we look at the needs of the veteran. We develop programs to meet those needs. Where we still can't meet those needs because there's something in the law or regulation or policy that prevents us, that's where we then take our advocacy program and we try to apply it in order to try to change those things. So, one of the things that could be really helpful for us is that when we start, pushing hard to get this combat deployment data reported again in the VA's, report, to ask your viewers to sign up for our petition, because that's what people care about.
Right.
Politicians care about voters, and voters signing petitions do actually work. And so, we'll ask for that. I'll also say we want to grow we're starting back up the Operation Resiliency post-COVID. We're having our first one post-COVID next month in Nashville with a Marine Reserve unit out of Ohio. And we're going to be doing at least one or two a month going from there. If any of your viewers believe that their unit would be good, good to sign up, you can go to our website, www.independencefund.org, and you can make application for your unit. And we're looking at the company battalion level, or if you're, if you're a squadron level, if you're that type of unit. And we'd love to have your viewers, asked to join.
Right.
But I mean, look, I'm all about railing against the machine, okay? But at some point, we've got to convert that being pissed off into action. And I'd like to tell your viewers that we think the Independence Fund is a way to be able to do that, but it needs them to weigh in when we ask them to.
And when is that?
And if you guys will help us get the word out on that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why we're here today. What is it that my viewers can do to get involved in this situation? Now, keep in mind, we're heavily military and first responder, veteran and active service. So,
right. Well, first off, the regulations are clear that in their personal capacity, even active duty military personnel are allowed to engage their members of Congress or the president in their personal capacity. And that's what we do when we ask them to sign one of our letters or sign one of our petitions. And so if I can, I'll send you the links for some of our petitions. People can go to our website and go to the advocacy webpage on our website and sign up for our stuff, and then we'll keep and then once they've signed up, we'll keep them involved about when we have upcoming needs for weighing in on some of this stuff. And their voice matters. I mean, we delivered 40,000 people sent a letter to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs in favor of expanding community care so veterans could get care outside of the VA when the VA couldn't see them quick enough.
Right.
And they said, and we got that in 1 week. And the VA said it was the most comments they'd ever gotten on any regulation. And they referenced those 40,000 people throughout the regulation as to why they were going to do what they were going to do. So people do pay attention to those individuals.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And again, just to go back to some of these numbers, I know that our audience knows anecdotally that this is a rising problem. One that, we thought peaked and then we were in a valley, but now has peaked again. As I said at the beginning of the show, active, reserve, and guard numbers are all up. About 700 active service members, guard, reserve, or active duty soldiers killed themselves in 2020. Less than 100 U.S. service members died in the line of duty in the same year. So at least 7 times more are killing themselves than, and I guess, you could say that is in the line of duty in a lot of ways. It's
and we work on that too. We've had some situations where, someone who has died of suicide, and the VA is trying to say that, no, it's not a service related. And we fought that. And by the way, we have a casework program as well at the Independence Fund. We work on the more healthcare side of things and the caregiver side of things. And if you're If your folks have a complex issue with the VA or Department of Defense and need help, we're here to help.
Right. And it's what we do from time to time. I mean, I've personally experienced 2 separate suicides that were classified by the local unit as drug overdoses because they didn't want the person to they didn't want the family to miss out on SGLI and things like that. Right. It shouldn't have to be that way. It should be that we understand the situation and respond to it in a way that's apolitical and without regard to budget. These are human beings' lives, and they're not normal human beings. They're the people that have sacrificed, I guess at this point, everything that they could possibly sacrifice.
And we've put them through the ringer. We've put them through the ringer in a way that almost 50% of all post 9/11 veterans have seen combat.
Right. Yeah.
Only about 25% of pre 9/11 veterans saw combat.
Right.
And post 9/11 veterans, because of that, are about twice as likely to have PTSD and twice as likely to have mental health issues. And it's because the post 9/11 veteran has been put through the ringer far greater than the pre 9/11 veteran. Now, there are plenty of pre 9/11 veterans who were put through the ringer, but as a group,
right,
the post 9/11 veteran has had it tougher, I think.
Yeah, certainly have. And there's also been, for some reason, a significant pushback against alternative types of treatment, like the reunions, and for a while, CBT with EMDR associated with it was kind of a taboo thing because guys were having to go outside of the military to get it, right?
Or stellate ganglion.
Yeah, stellate ganglion shots as well, which my co-host Dakota has actually done. Speaking of Dakota, right now he's the reason he's out on the road today is because he's out with Alex Dominguez, who is a Texas House Representative guy from District 37, working on HB House Bill 1802 in Texas. And it's related to study using alternative therapies for treatment of mental health and medical conditions, essentially using psilocybin and MDMA and whatever else, right? Ketamine, various other things, to study their effects. I mean, they've had great success. These studies have been going on for a while. Stanford did one, I believe it started back in 2013. I was invited to it because I lived in Oakland at the time, didn't have time to do all of it, but there's a critical mass of people now advocating for this because the research is pretty clear. And to be frank, the research has been pretty clear for a long goddamn time. The Israelis have been studying this since the early 50s with marijuana and with MDMA and various other things. They've been studying and also LSD, by the way, for years. Since there's an LSD study that happened in 1952 in Israel for autism that then got ported over and used to study post-traumatic stress. So the key stakeholders in this particular bill is Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas, Marcus Capone, former Navy SEAL, Amber Capone, his wife, Dr. Sanjay Matthew, various other people, Special Operations Veterans Organization, Vets Organization, MAPS Organization. There's a ton of people getting involved in this. And I got to be honest, if you're, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's some kind of moral reprehension or something like that, or apprehension because they don't understand these processes or what it's like for these new treatments. But if you're standing in the way of people getting treatment because you disagree with the style of treatment, then you're a piece of shit, frankly. And there can be absolutely no tolerance for that stuff. Whatever works, right? We're talking ones and zeros here because it's either the light switch is on and that person's alive or it's off and they're dead. And whatever we got to do to stop that shit from happening has got to be done, right?
Right. No, look, I mean, we see this as well on hyperbaric oxygen treatment, and some people say the evidence is clear, it doesn't help with PTSD. Others say the evidence is clear, it does help with PTSD, but right now it doesn't, it doesn't meet like the FDA standard of clear evidentiary standard in order to be adopted,
right.
Which is unfortunate because the people, there's plenty of anecdotal evidence that people, they say that HBOT, while temporary, is very helpful.
Right.
There's also another aspect. You talk about, what's going on down in Texas. There's also another aspect, I think, of veteran mental health and suicide prevention that is outside of the direct mental health. And so much of what, veterans oftentimes have to deal with is just the bureaucracy. They dealt with it while they're in the service. Now they're dealing with the VA, and just the sclerosis of the bureaucracy and its inability to respond in anything other than a bullshit way.
Yeah.
Can drive those mental health issues.
Right.
One of the things that we're doing in North Carolina is we're working with a bunch of North Carolina legislators who are putting forth this bill called No Veteran Left Behind. We're doing a pilot program in 6 counties where we're basically going to provide resources to local law enforcement to really intervene in the criminal justice system early on. The part of the problem is that, you have a veteran who's in crisis, either substance abuse or mental health crisis, and you don't know how to respond. The families don't know how to respond. They call 911, and it may be a small county, doesn't have a whole lot of resources, and the sheriffs aren't trained in this sort of stuff.
No, of course not.
And what is their responsibility? Their responsibility is to uphold the law.
Right.
They're not social workers. So we try to figure. So we're going to be working with these counties in order to be able to figure out how to be able to bring in alternative resources, how to be able to decriminalize and de-escalate these situations, so that the first response, so it doesn't escalate too quickly.
Right.
Things like veteran treatment courts and the Veterans Justice Outreach Program and the Homelessness Office of VA are great, but they're well into the criminal justice system. So we're working with these 6 counties in order to be able to see if we can prevent it from even getting to that point. And if your viewers, have lived in other states and want to, work with us on doing the same thing in their states, we'd love to be able to get in touch with them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's we definitely love those resources. I know that I talked to Sarah Verardo, another member of your organization.
My boss.
It's fun. Yeah. She's the boss lady over there. She's been pretty active in these veteran court situations lately, trying to get, to be honest, I think a lot of people just don't understand. Like you said, it becomes very black and white to them, to the police officer or to the court or whomever it is, that this is the law was broken, so we have to do this. Now, we have intervention for all sorts of groups of people, right? People that have drug problems, children that from bad neighborhoods or with bad upbringing, people with mental health disorders and blah, blah, blah. For some reason, it's taken 20 years of fucking war to get any attention on these veterans in the courts. And, in addition to all the other issues here, that seems particularly problematic to me, that it's almost an afterthought. Like, oh shit, I forgot to turn the stove off. Like, dude, are you fucking kidding me? You put us in war for 20 years and all of a sudden now it's a fucking thing to do. But at least it's getting done. There's a lot of resources out there now that weren't there before, primarily from private organizations like yours, frankly.
Well, and look, okay, so I'm gonna do my history. A guy named Alexis de Tocqueville wrote one of the greatest books about American democracy called I forgot what the name of his book was, but he was a French philosopher that came on over after the Revolution and looked at American society, and he said what's truly strong about America is not its government, it's not its democracy, it's its society, and the fact that it has so many non-governmental organizations that get involved in communities' problems and solve them. And I think that's a strength of America. Let's take advantage of that. Let's leverage that. And that's what we're trying to do at the Independence Fund.
Right.
We're doing that with No Veteran Left Behind. We're doing that with Operation Resiliency. We're doing that with our caregiver programs. We're doing that with our casework programs.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Democracy in America is the name of the book.
Okay, cool. Democracy in America, you said?
Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville.
I'll definitely check that out. Yeah, I mean, it's Emperor Hirohito, when asked about a potential invasion of America, very frankly said, no one's ever going to invade America because there'll be a rifle behind every blade of grass. Now, he was right about that. He was absolutely right about that. But I talk about this on this show and on Drink It Bros all the time. One of the most charitable group on earth is the American citizen. From the shit that went down in Indonesia back in the day in Haiti, to pretty much any worldwide disaster, the American citizen gives more money to those causes than any other group, including governments, including our own government, frankly. We need to start fucking doing a little bit of that here. I mean, we've got major problems, not just with veterans, but with homelessness and the opioid crisis and all this other shit that clearly the government has no intent to fix. It's the 30-second out mantra. No one's coming for us. We got to do this shit ourselves. So in addition to the resources like what you guys have, excuse me, we have a private Facebook group called Drinking Bros Vigilant Guard that you can join. There's about 11,000 people in there. There's a lot of social workers, a lot of people that are actively going through the same shit that you're going through. And, sometimes just talking about it helps. Sometimes they can help you with strategy. Sometimes they can help you with resources. Sometimes they can just fucking listen. You know what I mean? Which is, a big thing as well. Now, we got about 5 minutes left here. Tell me about all the ways that people can help your organization do what it's doing.
Okay. Number one, you said it before. It's all about the money. If you're 11,000 people on Vigilant Guard, each gave $5, we would fund another Operation Resiliency for another 75 to 100 combat veterans.
So it's about 60 grand for one event? Okay.
Yep. If they each gave $1, I can recruit about 20,000 advocates to write Congress or the president or the Secretary of Veterans Affairs about our legislative and policy initiatives.
Okay.
Two, sign up for our newsletter, because we'll reach back out to you and say, we're running this campaign in order to be able to write your member of Congress. Please sign up. And we pre-write the letter. You can change it if you want to, but we pre-write the letter for you. And all you got to do is put in your name and address, and we automatically send it to the right congressman and senator. Three, if they need help, they can reach out to us, and they can go to our website and they can get help, whether it be they need mobility assistance. Our bread and butter is these cross-country tracked wheelchairs, motorized tracked wheelchairs. If they're caregivers and they need help in being a caregiver, if they are a catastrophically disabled veteran and they want to figure out how to be able to navigate the VA healthcare system, we can help them. If they're a member of a unit, a combat unit that thinks that Operation Resiliency would be great for them, they can nominate their unit and we'll get them into that queue. And those are all, and they're helping by identifying the needs that they have that we can solve. They're helping us.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, just having it all out there is a big part of solving things. There's a phrase in government, and for better or worse, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
Exactly.
The more hell we raise.
I made a career of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The more hell we raise collectively, the less chance that our people are going to get left behind.
Exactly.
Just to reiterate, and thanks to PT News Network for bringing all your people in here too. We appreciate it. To reiterate, it's independencefund.org. And then
right.
Is there a separate space for Operation Resiliency, or does it all go through the same thing there?
If you just go to the website, go to the pull down menu, you'll see it right away. Okay.
And where can people find you on social media?
Usually it's Indie Fund. So our Twitter is Indie Fund, at Indie Fund on Twitter. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram. I don't know if we're on TikTok yet. Yeah, we're on TikTok. And then we have a separate one if they want to track my sexy work on advocacy. It's TIF in DC, TIF in DC. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's all TIF in DC.
Right. Great. So American Party fans, Drinking Bros fans, we've done this before. For those of you that weren't around at the time, Richard Stayskull, who developed cancer because of medical malpractice from the DOD, tried for years to get some recompense and was not allowed to because of the Fairies doctrine. It took you guys about a month to fuck with Senate so hard that they had to stop that shit and put it into the National Defense Authorization Act. Let's see what we can do for the Independence Fund and Operation Resiliency, and see if we can't get our people a little bit of help.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you tuning in today. We will see you guys later. Again, that's independencefund.org if you want to check out the organization. And, if you got any money to give for them, that would be great. And we'll see you in hell, guys.
Thank you.